Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 204 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hello, everybody. We are a father-son duo here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. And today we'll be talking about our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and their dominant win over Houston Christian and the huge upcoming game against Michigan. We'll also talk about the biggest games from week 3 of college football, of which there were quite a few. It was a nice weekend. And look ahead to what's coming up next week.
That sounds great.
Yeah. And some surprise coaching shakeups as well in week 3.
Well, now I think I might have mentioned something. I don't know if it was on our live podcast or it was post-podcast, just you and I talking, that, in light of the Scott Frost thing, that if people are going to make a change, they're going to do it earlier in the season now, because it just becomes this aggressive competition to find your replacement. But I was also predicting, and obviously was wrong, that these ADs would show more patience in the NIL era with coaches. But I kind of get the UCLA one. The Virginia Tech one, I'll have to look deeper.
Yes, well, we'll give it a little preview there, but yes, I'll rake you over the coals for your little prediction last week. Don't you worry. But before we dive into all that, we're going to stick with our tradition, open up a cold beverage. I got myself one of my Golden Road mango carts here.
Okay. And I'm drinking another one that I haven't drank on the podcast before. It's referred to as Brad's Best Premium Brew. It's an Ordock Brewing Company American Amber Ale out of Marquette, Michigan Brewing Company, Ordocks Brewing Company. Great brewery if you're ever up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Very cool. Well, cheers.
Cheers. Oh, mine's a little foamy.
All right. So, yes, on the last week's podcast, we, of course, gave our prediction for the Houston Christian game. We were both feeling confident that we would put up good numbers. I predicted we would win 45-9, and you predicted 45-10. So we were pretty much right on the same line there. And thankfully, we actually did a bit better than that. We did 59-7. So only letting up the one touchdown, which was actually looking like it was going to be a good play until the guy whiffed on the tackle, and then the running back went the opposite direction, for a huge gain. But aside from that, we really dominated that Houston Christian team.
Right. Yeah, actually, and it was like a 45-yard run that player, got credited for, but he probably ran, 70 yards because he ran to one side of the field, was going to get tackled for about a three-yard loss, and then spun out of it somehow, got away from that defensive lineman, and then ran the entire other side of the field and up the sidelines and in for the score.
Yeah. Yep. And we did what we wanted. You said on the last podcast that we wanted to see a repeat of the previous week's game where we just played solid football and got off to a large lead. We're able to put in our second and third team guys, and we were able to do that. We were up 38-0 by halftime. So in the second half, we had TJ Lateef, our second string quarterback, come out, and a lot of the other guys. So from one point of view, if Dylan and the first team guys had stayed in longer, maybe we could have gotten to 68 points again like last time, got bigger stats. But I like Matt's decision to just go to the second and third string guys and give them their playing time. And we still scored plenty of points after that, as seen by the fact that we went up to 59, scored 3 more touchdowns. And there was a fourth one we could have had that we were right on the goal line and we couldn't quite get.
Right.
So, yeah, not a whole lot to complain about there.
No, I agree. And I was actually a little bit surprised. I was in attendance to the game with your mother, and I was a little bit surprised that they didn't go ahead and bring out the first team offense to operate the first series of the second half. But they chose not to. They just decided, nope, we've seen enough, and they went not only with TJ Lateef at quarterback, they pretty much wholesale changed everyone. I mean, like the entire second team offensive line started the second half. So Coach Rule was feeling very confident in himself and his team to make that move. I feel like it doesn't happen very often, where the very first offensive series of the second half, when you still have half a game to go, and you wholesale, because you run the risk that if something were to go kind of bad, haywire, if that was to go sideways, and you needed to bring some of your first team people back in, they're pretty disconnected. If to begin the second half, you've already effectively, by your decision, communicated to them, hey, your day's done.
Right. It's a weird kind of mental shakeup for them in that situation.
Right. But you know what? I don't know that this is necessarily the spot in the podcast to bring this up, but I'm going to mention it just because we're talking about that whole beginning of the second half thing. What I loved was being in the stadium, the very last timeouts of the game that we had. We had a series, and we were clearly trying to march it down the field. Our coaches were still actively out there coaching and trying to get these young kids to, remain focused and execute. And I love that. But it wasn't just the coaches, even the starters, right? They were engaged. Like Emmett Johnson was with the running backs, the young running backs who were in at the time, at the end of the game. He was in the huddle with them. He was coaching them up, even more so than the running backs coach. I mean, he was the guy out there telling them what to do and trying to keep them focused. And the same was true for the wide receivers. Some of the starting wide receivers were with the wide receiver group. So clearly, coach is trying to create a culture where it's like, hey, guys, this is your team. Help your younger players.
Right. Which is exactly the sort of thing that Matt set out to do when he started at Nebraska and working on the culture and things like that. And sounds like he's got that going in a much more positive direction than it was when he started. So that is good to see.
Yeah, it was excellent. I was very happy about that.
And look at the stats. We had 554 total yards to their 160, 362 passing it, 192 rushing it. And of those rushing yards, 85 of them came off of our running back Ives, who had 12 carries for 85 yards. So he had a good day. It was nice to see him get in there to play after not seeing him so much in the first two games.
Right. And he's the young man that's coming off of a hamstring injury early in the preseason. So I think he's starting to get a little bit more comfortable. And he's a guy that we're really going to need. I don't know what Mekhi Nelson didn't play. And so I have a feeling that maybe he was dinged up a little bit and they decided not to play him, as well as a couple of other players, a couple of defenders that didn't play either. And that's the right choice against an opponent like this. So I'm glad about all that. But I still feel like, there's a question mark at running back after EJ. And EJ's good. I mean, when he was in there, he ran hard, he ran intelligently. He was available. Man, he was wide open, Alex, many, many times during that game. Okay. But Raiola just never went through the progressions to where he had to go to the relief valve, which was him. I almost wish he would have done it a couple of times, because it almost seemed like, he was being ignored by the defense.
I see. So we should have taken advantage of that.
Well, the thing is, though, you're throwing a ball basically sideways versus throwing it downfield. Well, of course, Raiola is going to throw it downfield, but I just wonder if he had been able to give EJ, that kind of open field, and then make a guy miss, and he's off to the races. You know what I mean?
Yes. And one other bit I want to mention, well, two actually. One, we got 2 turnovers on the game. Well, we turned the ball over to them 0 times, which was good. And we also only had 4 penalties for 45 yards, which is an improvement over last week, the previous week, where even though we won, I think we had 7 or 8 penalties. Right. So I was glad to see us being more buttoned up there, because that's going to be very important next week against Michigan.
I agree. Well, and I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think there are going to be more penalties next week. There just is. I guarantee it.
Right. Well, and I don't know that this is 100% true, but I feel like the refs, back off a little bit when it's such a blowout game, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
something that they would have called for pass interference or whatever. If it's kind of on the edge, maybe they don't mention it because, the game's already over. Like, who cares?
Well, right, and they let's and it's hot, and they're trying to protect the players from themselves a little bit as far as getting hurt and stuff like that, and so the conditions were brutal down on the field, and so I think that referees do tend to kind of have a little blind eye when it gets lopsided.
Now, one thing I'm curious about is Archie Wilson, our punter, had a great game in the first game against Cincinnati, and now in both these two games, he hasn't had to punt at all, which obviously is a good thing because it means our offense was out there driving and scoring points. But it does make me, a tiny bit worried if he's going to be a little bit rusty, or, will he be ready for that intense game day atmosphere next week against Michigan?
He has those few punts he did in the first game on tape. And if there is something that's wrong with how he did that, meaning he does this unorthodox method that sometimes takes more than the typical two-step and punt arrangement that has become the standard traditional punt situation, right? So I worry a little bit about Michigan having a block ready, prepared for him because we haven't had to be exposed. You know what I mean? Like that could be an issue. And I will also tell you that as one who watched him punt, boy, he doesn't necessarily punt a beautiful ball in the traditional sense of punting. Meaning, I've watched punters warm up, at college football games for decades, and I know what a great punter looks like when he hits that ball and it's got a beautiful spiral and it turns and it drops and the thing is way high and the hang time is awesome and all that sort of stuff. That is not what we've got in Archie Wilson.
Yep.
He is not that guy. Now, he has this funky thing that literally kicks it and it curves in the air.
Right.
It curves. And he can do it with both legs. I watched him practice with both legs. But it doesn't have a lot of hang time. And so if someone is able to actually catch his punt because of the lack of height, we might be in a little trouble.
Well, and as we pointed out in the first game, he's able to put that if he wants to, if he knows this is what he wants, he can put that kind of backspin on the ball where it just kind of dies where it lands, if you want to try to pin him deep, which is hopefully a weapon we can use.
Right. So hopefully we don't have to see him much in the game next week, but I have a feeling we will need him.
Yeah, I think we can count on that.
Yeah.
So yes, of course, that next game is against Michigan, who beat Central Michigan, their team from this past week. They beat them 63-3. So full pummeling there, putting some confidence into their quarterback, Bryce Underwood. Yeah. I watched the recap of that game, and the couple takeaways I have are, one, this Bryce kid can run it. And we have had some issues in the past dealing with dual threat quarterbacks. So that is something I'm definitely concerned about, where we, flush out of the pocket to like go full coverage on all their receivers. And then he just, tucks it and runs it for a first down. I could definitely see that happening.
Absolutely. Even if we do a good job of putting pressure on him, then there's a pretty decent chance that he squeaks out of the pocket. And this isn't some tiny little quick quarterback. This is not Denard Robinson era Michigan. This is, Bryce Underwood, who's 6'5", maybe 6'6", 225, 30 pounds. And he's a hoss. And he's athletic. And he can go. That scares the daylights out of me. And see, he didn't do that. He didn't run hardly at all against Oklahoma or their first game. And then last week, they had some very impressive stats in this game against CMU. They pretty much could name the score. I watched the game as well, Alex, and was quite impressed with him. He was really good.
Right.
I mean, Amazing.
Obviously, part of the reason he was having that success was because their receivers were getting wide open against the CMU guys, which was not happening at all against Oklahoma.
Correct.
And the same, of course, goes for us, in some of the passes that Dylan throw. I should mention this. TJ Lateef in the second half had that beautiful, huge pass play that was thrown right on the money. That was a real beauty.
Oh, that was. We were, a lot of the people in the crowd had left because that was in the fourth quarter, and it was 95 degrees and humid, and people were miserable. So most of the fans had left by then, but we stayed, and that was an absolutely beautiful pass that TJ threw. I mean, it was probably 55, maybe 58 yards in the air, and it was right on the money into about a 15-mile-an-hour wind. So very impressive on TJ's part for sure. But and I guess I want to make that statement about both Michigan and Nebraska, because I did watch some extended highlights. I didn't watch every single play of the Michigan-Oklahoma game, but I watched a lot in trying to kind of evaluate what was going on there. I'm really glad we had these two games, because I think that builds our depth for the future. Win or loss this next week, okay, we have built some depth and hopefully some confidence in our younger players and our overall team that's going to hopefully support us well throughout this season, even if we lose this weekend. But at the same time, I don't think you can take very much away from what we've done these last 2 weeks in terms of prognosticating for our game against Michigan. And similarly, I don't think you can say much about Michigan's victory against CMU. They got a couple of turnovers, also, just like we did. We had a scoop and score in our game. They didn't have a scoop and score, but they had a couple of short field opportunities because of turnovers. And both teams were incredibly dominant on their opponent. So it's hard to make a lot of judgments about that, except for the fact that when you watch Bryce Underwood throw a ball, that ball's got some zip on it, man. If anything, he's probably going to have to develop the ability to have a little more touch on his passes so that more his receivers will be able to catch it more frequently.
Well, I was going to comment on that because just watching the highlights from that Central Michigan game, it's true that Michigan got 2 turnovers on Central Michigan, but Central Michigan got 1 on Michigan where Bryce went for a deep ball and missed through it, and the Central Michigan guy caught it. And he had another one like that right at the very beginning of the game that was in the Central Michigan guy's hands, and he dropped it. So that's going to be one of my takeaways, is that I need our defense to get at least 1 turnover, 1 interception in this game, because I think he's vulnerable to it. If we can get them in a situation where he has to go long, I think we can pick him off.
Well, or he is accelerated in his progressions or decision making. That's going to be key. We're going to have to find some ways to disrupt him. But the thing is that, man, when he runs the football, when you look at the stats for Michigan, and they had a tremendous day running the football, but over 100 of those yards were Bryce, and a few of those Bryce runs were designed runs, but the vast majority of them were him deciding to run after he, looked downfield, went through some of his progressions, and then just decided to run it. In addition, another huge change that I saw between the Oklahoma game and this Central Michigan game is they rolled him out. They moved the pocket and cleared him from his offensive line basically a lot during the CMU game. I think they're setting us up for some tremendous play action pass opportunities this week. They called a very specific game plan against CMU, and they're setting Nebraska up.
Well, I was going to mention, so they had 625 total yards of offense. 235 of that was off of passing on 25 attempts, and 390 was off of 52 rushing attempts. So obviously, in this game, they were very much skewed towards the running game. Like you say, Bryce was around 100 of those yards by himself. And you yourself said on a previous podcast that Michigan's offensive coordinator would be wise to just try to pound the rock and exploit our defensive line versus trying to pass it all over the yard.
No, and they are absolutely going to do that. It will be criminal if they don't use that game plan basically against us. But having said that, what they did against CMU, I believe, was designed to set us up for some significant play action pass opportunities that they intend to take advantage of against us. So we're going to be so locked into their running game because they ran for 400 yards. And I tell you, it was really closer to 500, Alex, because they had some huge running plays called back in their game against CMU. I mean, big time, great runs that were called back because of penalty. Now, again, I'm not saying CMU's defense was spectacular or anything, right? So I'd like to think that our defense is better, except for one fatal flaw, which we've talked about on the podcast a lot, and that is our defensive line. I think any decent offensive coordinator is going to watch the film of Nebraska's 3 games and say, I know how to beat these guys. And we're going to just pound the rock. We're going to be extremely patient running the football. Even if we get tackled for only 2 or 3 yard gains for a few times, I know that eventually Nebraska's defensive line is going to wear down, or they're going to blitz wrong. They're going to twist wrong. And then it's going to be Mack truck, man, drive a Mack truck through the hole, and our guy's going to take it to the house. So if I'm Michigan, I'm doing that all day long. And then as I start to have some success with it, I'm going to hand that ball or look like I'm handing that ball off. I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to turn, and I'm going to throw to a wide open wide receiver running down the field. That is absolutely what Michigan's going to do to us.
Yep. But I will mention 2 other things to give us some hope. One, they did miss a field goal in that Central Michigan game, 40-something yards, I believe.
And he missed one at the Oklahoma game. And this is an All-American field goal kicker. Okay. And he's missed 2 in the last 2 weeks.
There you go.
That would have typically been in his range.
Right. They weren't 50-plus yarders.
Right.
And also, in that Oklahoma game, they got beat up pretty good, and they had quite a few players out of the Central Michigan game, including 2 of their starting offensive linemen. Now, I don't know how serious those injuries are. I saw some speculation that maybe they were sitting some people out who are maybe dinged up because they know they're playing us the following week, and they'd rather play them there. So I don't know the full extent of their injuries, but they're more beat up than we are at the very least.
Well, trust me, Alex, those guys are all going to be playing against us. I'm serious. I saw them on the sidelines. They talked about it during the game. Those guys are going to be playing against us. So that was just them making a conscious decision that we can beat CMU with our second teamers, and we're going to make sure we're at full strength for Nebraska.
Well, but at the very least, they're dinged up. They're playing hurt, even if they're not injured, right? So Correct. Hopefully, talking about our defensive line, right, that's where they need to step up. That's where John Butler needs to come with a good game plan. Obviously, you never want to look too far ahead as a team, right? You're always looking to the next week. But for a fact the coaches had this Michigan game circled. The team has been working on a game plan for this specific team, probably some special plays or formations. So I'm hoping that John has something good concocted that's been in the oven, for a bit to try to surprise Michigan.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to tell you, Alex, I think that is exactly true, and that Nebraska has absolutely played a relatively vanilla on defense. As far as the various pressures and different ways that they can scheme, gap assignments and things of that nature. And we will become more sophisticated in this week's matchup against Michigan. Similarly, on offense, I think Dana Holgorsen has played it very close to the vest. I mean, Dylan doesn't have an interception yet. Dylan probably will throw an interception in this game against Michigan because I think we're going to open it up. I think the game plan is going to be to give the look of what we've been doing, to chunk it down the field, and we're going to take some shots on this Saturday that we did not take in the previous weeks.
Yeah. Well, and so now we're getting into our predictions here. And interestingly, the Vegas line as of Sunday, September 14th, when we're recording, is Michigan by 2.5. So they're the favorites, but not by very much. I'll be curious to see if that changes over the course of this week.
Oh, it definitely will. And keep in mind that if it's a plus 2.5, that is really a 5.5 because there's always a 3-point, home field number. So
Right.
if Nebraska wasn't at home or if it was a neutral field, then it would have been 5.5 or 6.5.
But still, they're saying it's going to be a one-score game, not that Michigan's going to drum us by 21 points, which could happen.
That's true.
But yes, it is a home field for us. We know, I believe the game's at 2:30 local time, so not a night game, but the fans are definitely going to come out and be excited. We said it before the season started. We really wanted to be 3-0 going into this game, even though that Cincinnati game was not as clean as we were hoping it would be. It's a W. We're coming off of this nice stretch here. Michigan's ranked 21st rather. They lost to Oklahoma, right? So they're the ones who have a 1 in the loss column. And I think because we know we're the underdogs, there's a world where we come in and we play very freely because we're expected to lose and we have, sucked for so many years recently. So if we win, if we get off to a good start, I could see the momentum really piling on in our favor. Obviously, this is me being optimistic here. But
I love that about your son.
So I think I'm going to agree with Vegas. Basically, I'm going to predict that Michigan wins because I'm being a realist here. But I think it will be close, which may be heartbreaking for Nebraska fans to lose another close game. But I think we won't be embarrassed at the very least.
Well, okay. So I agree with a lot of what you said there, Alex. And I very much want, obviously, Nebraska to win or at a minimum play well. And there's no doubt in my mind that Nebraska is a better football team right now as we stand here at 3-0 this year versus the 3-0 we had last year at this time, right? But I would also say that similar to last year, Nebraska still has some major, and I mean major, weaknesses that are so obvious to anybody who watched even the successful games we just had over these last couple of weeks against lesser opponents. Our interior defensive line is not acceptable. And we do not have the answer because we do not have the big bodies in the it would be one thing if there was a group of defensive tackles that we could rotate in when we played a team that wanted to line up and smash us down our throats, and we could at least slow that down, even if maybe they weren't as athletic to handle the side-to-side things or the pass rushing things. And then it becomes a strategic game of, personnel and who's in the game and that sort of stuff. But we flat out do not have defensive linemen that are ready to play Big Ten football. I'm specifically saying defensive tackles, not defensive ends. That interior nose guard defensive tackle position, our guys are not ready. They're young, they're talented, they're strong, they look great. I mean, they're all Americans while they walk off the bus, but they are not ready for what's going to come at them on Saturday. So much like here's the thing with Big Ten coaching, Big Ten coaches are really good. They understand when they recognize a weakness. Iowa's Kirk Ferentz just won his game this past weekend and just became the top winning coach in the history of the Big Ten, 206 victories. And Kirk understands that concept very, very well. He understands how to take a team that has a singular weakness and attack that weakness throughout a game in such a way that it leads to victory for his team. Now, he does it in a very slow, shorten the game, methodical process. Michigan, because of the athletes that they have, they're going to exploit that weakness and crush you. So as much as I'm desperate for Nebraska to win, and I want you to be correct, I want you to be correct that we at least play well and it's close. And I would obviously be over the moon with a victory. I'm going to predict a loss, and it's not going to be pretty. I think Michigan's going to beat us by 2 to 3 scores. So I don't know that I've given a number to it yet, but I'm going to say it's going to be like 38-17.
Well, and I'm going to go closer, so say that we lose, but it's going to be 31-27. I think even though Michigan's defense is obviously very good, I think we have enough dynamics, and Dylan is clearly playing at a good pace right now. I think we will score on them. The question is John Butler and the defense. Right. What can they do? And like you say, that is our weakness so far in the season.
Yeah, I think our offense is good. And against most schools, we're going to do okay and have some pretty decent offensive numbers. And I mean, we've proven that already, that, we can execute and be effective and efficient. So I love that. But there's going to be a snowball effect that's going to happen when it becomes clear that our defense cannot stop Michigan's running game. And then we're going to start doing crazy things where we're trying to, blitz and do all this stuff to try to shore that up and to put pressure on the quarterback. And then the legs of Bryce Underwood are going to crush us. So between the two of them, they're going to run us roughshod. And it's just a matchup thing. The next week against Michigan State, I'll feel like we have a pretty decent shot. Not next week, the next game. I'm saying very specifically this Michigan team with this coaching staff, and we haven't even mentioned, Alex, that the head coach isn't going to be there,
right?
And he cannot be a part of this week's coaching at Michigan. To me, that's not a punishment for a team. Let's give them a rally cry. Let's give them something to build around. Right? That's what that's what we gifted them. That's what the NCAA gifted them against Nebraska. I would have rather Sharon Moore been the coach and none of this punishment, quote punishment. It's not a punishment. I don't want it. It's not good for Nebraska. It's an advantage for Michigan.
Well, and we talked about that last year with what happened with Jim Harbaugh, where similarly he was not the official head coach during the Nebraska game, but they still beat us just fine. So that may well be the case again. But the one factor where it would go in our favor is if we get momentum and we actually are in the lead, like going into halftime and stuff like that, not having him there when his team is behind and being there to rally or adapt, that could be significant. But for that to happen, we have to start strong, and that's a big if.
Right. Yeah, Alex, you are right. And I'm not saying we can't win this game. If I was going to give a percentage prediction of can we win the game, it would be probably 15%. We have a 15% chance of winning, and we have an 85% chance of losing. And I see far more scenarios where they just line up, play basic Big Ten simple football like they did against CMU, only with a lot more play action element than they did against CMU, and their quarterback single-handedly beats us. Now, the thing is, that approach, if they continue to use it throughout the season against not just Nebraska, but all their future opponents, eventually Bryce Underwood is going to get hurt. He's going to get injured or hurt and beat up to the point where he's not as effective and he makes poorer decisions and bad things start to happen. That Nebraska has a lot of experience with the athletic quarterback who, over the course of time, gets beat up because he runs too much, right? And so I can see that scenario building up, but early in the season when he's healthy and fresh, that's not a factor. He's got all the capabilities and faculty there at his disposal, and the one thing I would say is it doesn't look like Michigan's offensive line is of the caliber that it has been in recent years. They've won the Moore Award multiple times, and I don't think that this is a vintage offensive line group yet. I mean, they've got talent and they'll improve, but I think our defensive line interior is so bad that it's a weakness we cannot correct without personnel changes, and we don't have the personnel on our team, and that's what frustrates me. Again, I love Matt Rule. I think he's done so many great things with the culture and all the decisions he's made in his program. Phenomenal, except for a small fraction of percent. And that small fraction of percent is he should have did whatever he had to do to get at least one, if not two, big, bully, strong guys that had played some collegiate level football. They didn't have to be superstars. They didn't have to be all conference, but they had to be solid football players who could play in the Big Ten, and he didn't do that. And that's going to be the thing that is our Achilles heel that loses this game and a few others for us too.
Right.
So,
I was curious, so I went on ESPN's website, and you know how they have that like matchup predictor thing before games that shows you percentages and all that, because you said 15% for Nebraska. They currently have it basically 51-49 in our favor. So basically, they think it's a coin flip, which is surprising to me as a Nebraska fan.
No, it's not. This happens every year, Alex. They always jump on the bandwagon because they're trying to get clicks. They're trying to get people buzzing and talking. And there's nothing like stimulating a Nebraska fan base, one of the most anguished fan bases in all of sports. Okay, that's like predicting, a world championship for the Boston Red Sox prior to their championship from a few years ago, when they had found ways to lose for decades and decades and decades. That's where the Nebraska fan base is. We're being toyed with. We're being played. Those guys don't really think that. They really don't. They're like, well, it might happen. Let's throw that out there because it's going to create more buzz and more interest. Michigan's going to come in there and pound us. That's what I think is going to happen. And it's not because we're not a good defensive team or that we don't have an effective offense. I think we will be able to move the football until we get so far behind because Michigan is just beating the shit out of our front line. And once that happens, everything falls apart. And I think that's what we're going to see because the two opponents we've had for the last 2 weeks have done nothing to prepare us for what we're going to see in the Michigan game. Now, the Cincinnati game did, and I'll be my final point. The Cincinnati game, that Cincinnati has since won 2 games in a row, looked really good doing it. Their quarterback has been lights out since he played against us. So we do have a great secondary, Alex. And there's a chance that we could confuse and create some problems for Underwood if they were dumb enough to emphasize a throwing game against us. I think they're going to run the football down our throats. The passing game is going to be play action and roll out counter actions. It's not going to be the primary thing. It's going to be about running it down our throat.
Yeah, I was thinking about Cincinnati yesterday, but I didn't check on them. They beat NW State 70-0.
Exactly. And that quarterback, who struggled against us, right? I think he finished with like 69 yards or something against Nebraska, but he has been lights out in the 2 games since.
True, but remember, we mentioned in that game his receivers dropped some passes that were in their hands, so we knew he was pretty good.
Right. Yep, and he's looked good since the Nebraska game, and so Cincinnati was a legit opponent. I'm not trying to downplay that. Nebraska sucks. We don't. We suck in one spot, and it's just classic Nebraska that we are a good team in every spot on the field except for one. That has been our MO. Now, that one spot has varied, but we have a great secondary. We have a good athletic group of linebackers that are deep, so we can throw a lot of guys out there and not really drop off a lot. And our offensive line is mature, Our wide receivers are as good a group as we've had in a long time. And I think our running backs are actually more effective than I was aware of until, now we've seen a little bit of these guys. I think we got some talent there to work with. And frankly, going into this Michigan game, EJ's healthy. So as long as he doesn't get hurt in the, early in the game or something, then we have our best running back opportunity as well. So we got everything we need to move the football against their defense. But when they score in 4 plays, because they're taking chunks at a time on their running game, and our defensive line is looking at each other like, well, what are we supposed to do? We can't stop these guys. And then it's just going to fall apart. And it just frustrates me that of all the things that we could have done, Matt Rule screwed up in not getting 2 big burly dudes to help us get over the hump until these young defensive linemen were a year more mature.
Right.
And so that's my frustration until I see that I'm wrong next Saturday and our defense plays out of its mind, because they are playing in Lincoln. And like you said, Alex, if they are successful, excuse me, if Nebraska is successful in slowing them down early and we were able to get a lead, that put some pressure on Michigan, because this is one thing we haven't said. This is a must win for Michigan. They cannot have 2 losses, right? Their goal of being in the playoff is kind of out the window if they lose to us.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, and of course you will be attending the game, so you'll be able to give us the report back next week.
I will. It's going to be fun, and yep, we've got a nice tailgate group coming into town. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Have you talked to Brian about the game at all yet?
I have not, but he was calling while we were doing this podcast.
Okay, well, you have to chat with him after. One quick piece of recruiting news we wanted to mention. We got a new offensive tackle commit for 2027, Matt Erickson. He's a 3-star and a son of an alumni of a past player. So that was kind of cool.
Yes, and his dad was an excellent offensive lineman for us, and he's a 3-star, but that's just typical. Now, I understand this is in the 2027 class, not the 26 class, and he is the 2 top players in the state of Nebraska that we wanted for 2027 are already committed to Nebraska. So that's a huge thing moving in the positive direction for our 2027 class. And so I'm excited about him.
When I looked up the story on Husker Max about him, there was a picture of him with Matt and another coach, and he's like a full shoulder height above them. He's a big boy for sure.
He is a very big boy, as was his dad. So yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited about him. I think he's a building block for sure. And it's I don't think he's going to stay a 3-star, I guess is my point.
Right.
I think he'll ultimately be a little higher ranked than that.
Yep.
When he committed to Nebraska, he canceled his trip to Notre Dame.
Okay.
As a reference. So he's a guy that was being recruited by all the big boys.
That is impressive. And then quick mention of the women's volleyball team. They played an important match against number 22 ranked Utah at home this past week. I watched that game, and you were there in attendance for it. They kind of had a disappointing first set where they dropped some points and lost it, but then came roaring back and won in 3 straight with some large score spreads. Very impressively, I thought.
Yes, that's that second set where they responded to losing the first set was probably the best set of volleyball I've seen them play this year. And they hit 750. I mean, hitting 300 for a set is a good set. And they hit 750 on that set. They had no errors. They were phenomenal, absolutely spectacular. And the other unique thing about this weekend in the game that was held on Saturday evening, because that Utah game was Friday, on Saturday after the football game, they had a second match for the weekend. So this is a back-to-back situation. And then we have another huge game against another top 15 team in Creighton up here in Omaha on Tuesday, which your mother and I are going to be attending. So we're excited to see that. But that Saturday game on a back-to-back, Coach Danny did something that John Cook, who was on the call for the broadcast, admitted he would never do. She literally put the second team in. She put the B side in.
Right.
And they played the match against Grand Canyon University. And those girls played great. I mean, there just is not much drop off. I mean, I don't know that we're the best team in the country in volleyball, even though we're ranked number 1 right now. There's definitely some areas where we are weak. And if we were going into the NCAA tournament right now, I would not pick us to win the national championship. But there's no doubt we are the deepest team in that you put that B squad out there and you really can't tell the difference between that and the A squad.
Yeah, that is a good skill to have for sure.
Absolutely.
And then quick mention of something I don't think we've ever discussed on this podcast before, which is boxing, because Terrence Bud Crawford, who is, of course, from Omaha, Nebraska, and wears his Nebraska allegiance with pride, fought with Canelo Alvarez for the super middleweight championship yesterday, won it, and became a unified champion at 3 different weight classes, which has never been done before, I believe, in men's boxing. So really important win for him, and the world is singing his praises, so we want to shout him out.
Right. 2 things about that. One is, is that, he won the 3 different weight classes, but he also skipped a weight class. So he really jumped over a weight class to get to the one that he just won fighting Canelo, because he wanted to fight Canelo. I mean, that was the matchup, because Canelo is probably regarded as the best boxer in the world. A Mexican hero, if you will. Right.
Well, no, I don't think anyone believes Canelo's currently the best boxer in the world, because he's been kind of on a decline. He's lost some matches, but he had an amazing stint, and he's still one of the biggest stars in boxing for sure.
Right. And, well, he's on a down. Terrence should be too. He's 38 years old.
Well,
right.
Yeah.
So to do that, in the boxing world, to be the greatest at the sport internationally, at 3 different levels, including a 4th level, if you will, over that range of weight classes, is pretty amazing. And that's what makes him, the moniker of pound for pound the best boxer in the world. That is Terrence Crawford. I love it. And I saw an interview with Canelo, and he basically said, I just couldn't figure out his technique. I couldn't figure out his strategy. I didn't feel like I was getting beat, physically or whatever, but I just couldn't figure out how he was boxing.
Well, I watched that whole fight live, and in the later rounds, when Bud would tag him with a shot, you could see him like shake his head or grimace. You could tell he was just getting frustrated that the game plan wasn't working.
Right. Yep. But he was very gracious in defeat. Gave a lot of credit to Terrence, and that would be awesome. If somehow either this week, amazingly, or sometime later this year, he's able to lead Nebraska out of the tunnel again, like he did for the Colorado game at the beginning of last season.
Yep.
That would be an awesome event.
Hey, we won that Colorado game, so it was good luck.
We did. Exactly. People were fired up.
That's true. And then talk about the big week 3 games. We did give some predictions on the last podcast. The big one was, of course, Georgia versus Tennessee in the SEC. We both predicted Georgia would win. I said 27-17. You said 24-17. Ended up being much higher scoring than either of us thought. 44-41, Georgia won in overtime. Crazy back and forth game. Both teams had some turnovers, made some mistakes, but the big moment was that Tennessee drove it down at the end of the 4th quarter when they was still tied and had the chance to kick a 43-yarder to win the game, and the kicker missed it. So that's a tough one for that kid.
Important example of why having a consistent kicking game is so vital to the success of your football team.
We've got 2 other examples of that to talk about this week as well.
Yes, but anyway, my point would also be that, I was totally blown away. I'm watching that game, and it's like pinball. I mean, they are moving the ball back and forth. Tennessee's making these huge splash plays, big pass plays, blah, blah. And I'm like, where the hell? Georgia's defense had not given up but like 3 or 4 plays of greater than 15 yards the whole season in the previous 2 games. And then in the first half, they gave up 5 or something, 6 to Tennessee. It was ridiculous.
Well, yeah. I mean, even though in my prediction, I said Georgia would win by 10 points, but I still thought, like you say, Georgia's defense would be really good, kind of smother them, and Tennessee wouldn't be able to, get that close. But Tennessee did better than expected, even though it was a home game for Tennessee. So they did have that advantage. But yeah, they're definitely a team to watch out for this year.
Yes.
And then we also predicted Miami versus USF, Southern Florida. You predicted that Miami would win 31-21, whereas I went with my heart and thought that Southern Florida could pull off the big upset, 20-17. But my heart was not right. Should have gone with my brain. Miami crushed them 49-12. So yeah, that one just kind of went the way of the Hurricanes.
Yep, history did its thing.
Yes. Another one that we did discuss was Florida versus LSU. Florida obviously coming off of their tough loss to Southern Florida. And that turned out to be quite a funky game because LSU won, but even though it was a home game, they only won 20-10, which is a bit surprising. And when you look at the stats, Florida had 38 minutes time of possession, had 44 more total yards, but the key of the game is they had 5 turnovers while LSU only had 1. Yes.
And again, I thought LSU was a clearly better football team, but then the performance did not dictate that, right? I mean, Florida could have, should have, maybe even won that football game if they just, hold on to the football, don't have the mistakes. Florida probably wins that game.
Yeah.
But I thought LSU was by far the better team, especially given that Florida had lost the previous week, right? So it just blows me away that LSU wasn't able to do that. And that, again, I'm not a huge fan of LSU's coach, and I just think they are a mentally flawed team. They're physically very gifted, but they are a mentally flawed team.
Brian Kelly,
right? That's the current coach, yeah.
Yes.
But he had it going at Notre Dame. It just blows me away that someone would leave Notre Dame to go to LSU, and he did that because he thought he'd have more, control and more money, more NIL and all that stuff, anticipating all these changes. And although that's probably all true, he still has the fundamental weakness of the way that he coaches and the way he builds a culture that leads to the problem.
Well, speaking of which, that's a great transition into one of your other favorite coaches, Deion Sanders, who played against Houston this past week and lost 36-20, with his team just looking not very motivated and making a lot of mental mistakes.
Well, and he's gone through a turnstile at quarterback. He's not locking in on any one player to be his quarterback. And you know what? You just can't keep doing that, right? At some point, the players lose confidence in your leadership when you're taking your on the field leader, the quarterback, and constantly changing who's the starter and who you're bragging about.
Yep.
And so he is a fish out of water without his son.
Right. And Travis Hunter.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like an amazing talent. So losing that definitely hurts for him. One game I don't think we talked about last week, but we probably should have, was Texas A&M versus Notre Dame. That ended up being another slobber knocker, kind of like Tennessee, Georgia, with Texas A&M winning 41-40 off of another special teams mistake where Notre Dame on the PAT, the holder messed it up and they didn't get that 1 point. And then Texas A&M gets the ball back with not much time left in the fourth quarter, drives it down the field, makes several third down, fourth down conversions. They get to 4th and 11 at the goal line, and Notre Dame gives it up. And who's the one who catches the ball? Nate Borkacher, former Husker player.
Right, exactly. And I tell you what, Notre Dame now is looking at 2 losses, right? And they're probably on the outside looking in to the 12-team playoff situation.
Yep. I saw one of the sports writers on Twitter made a joke like, Notre Dame promises to join the Big Ten, the SEC, if they expand the playoff to 16 teams this year.
Yeah.
Because they're out. You're right. It's like the Michigan thing, right?
Yeah.
They can't afford to have 2 losses.
Yeah. No, that makes it very difficult. Very, very. I mean, you have to be perfect from there on out. If I mean, they'll have some opportunities, Notre Dame, with their schedule. But Stanford's down. I don't know if they play USC, but kind of depends on how good USC is this year, whether that becomes a very big, prominent win that they could win and then climb back into relevance. But that's not looking good.
True. And then this one was quite surprising. Georgia Tech versus Clemson. Clemson, who went in that game, ranked 12th. Georgia Tech ended up winning that one at home 24-21. And Clemson missed a 53-yard field goal earlier in the game. Obviously would have made a big difference, but you can't be too mad about missing a 53-yarder.
No.
But they can be more bad about, though, is that they were down -2 on the turnover margin. And then Georgia Tech runs it near the end of the game for some reason, doesn't get the first down. Clock is ticking. They have no timeouts. There's 20 seconds left. They run out the field goal team, and this field goal kicker makes a 55-yarder as time is ticking down to win the game. Talk about being clutch.
That's awesome. Well, and you know what? They probably practiced that, right? They practice those situations, last minute, no timeouts, got to get the people on and off the field and all that sort of stuff. And they were able to execute that and make it work.
Yeah. And I just looked it up because I was curious. And you're right. Notre Dame's, they've got some, solid teams left on their schedule, but not like the world beater type teams that would be a really quality win. You got like Purdue, Arkansas, Boise State, USC, Navy, Syracuse, teams like that.
Right. And do they even play Clemson? And now Clemson is yeah. And Clemson, maybe Miami. They already played Miami and they lost.
Yep.
So they're in a tough spot.
Yeah. And last game we'll mention real quick here, Vanderbilt pulled off a bit of a surprise against 11th ranked Southern Carolina, beat them 31-7, which I thought was crazy when I saw that score. But when you look at the reality of it, South Carolina's quarterback got hurt right before halftime, and the backup did not play particularly well. They ended up having 4 turnovers. So that kind of explains how the score got that way. But still an impressive win for Vanderbilt. Just watching the highlights, they're such a scrappy team. Like they just made these third downs happen by like making an extra move or spinning and things like that to convert something that looked like it was going to get stopped into a first down. I love watching their team.
Yes. Well, and they do play hard, but they're in the SEC and they, in all likelihood, their schedule, they're looking up at a schedule that probably doesn't include a lot of obvious wins from now on. So this was huge for them. And again, devastating for South Carolina, who, remember, was a fringe playoff team last year.
Right. That's true. Now looking into week 4 of college football, there are a few games of note. Miami has to play Florida. So after the tough loss to LSU, now Florida has to go play at Miami against their in-state rival. We've also got Oklahoma, Auburn in the SEC, and Texas Tech versus Utah in the Big 12.
Interesting. Texas Tech, Utah is going to be an interesting one. I think Utah is going to win that one comfortably.
It is at home for Utah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm a believer in Utah. I love their coach.
Yeah. But one of the big games in the Big 12 or the Big 10 rather that we'll give a prediction for here is Illinois versus Indiana. Interestingly, Indiana is ranked 19th in the AP while Illinois is ranked 9th. But it is a home game for Indiana, and Vegas currently has the odds at minus 4.5 for Indiana. So they're the favorites, right, even though they are ranked lower on the AP poll.
Well, and that shows the oddity of preseason rankings, because the reason that disparity exists is because where Illinois started the year, and they haven't lost. But Illinois has looked less impressive than Indiana. Indiana has looked exceedingly impressive. Now, against nobody competition, mind you, but right, exceedingly successful. And that's kind of what they did last year. They built this enormous amount of positive energy and positive belief and confidence by kicking the crap out of people, right? And then when they faced a good opponent, that confidence carried over and led to some success for them. That might happen again.
I would say your characterization is a bit off because Indiana actually struggled against Old Dominion in their first game of the year. They won 27-14, but I remember tuning in at a game when it was close. And that Old Dominion team went on to beat Virginia Tech, which we'll talk about later.
Yes.
So they struggled a bit with that one. Then they beat Kenesaw State 56-9 and Indiana State 73-0. But on the other hand, Illinois beat West Illinois 52-3, Duke 45-19, and Western Michigan 38-0. So both teams, while they haven't played anybody of real note, have put up big numbers.
Right. Well, and Illinois going into Duke, playing at Duke, which was a solid football team last year, and had an expectation this year, and they pretty much handled them. But they weren't dominant in the explosive, 73-0 category, right? So that's the difference I'm talking about. You look at Indiana's schedule of their 3 games, looks very, very similar to Nebraska's, right? Struggled in the first game, but came out victorious and then dominated 2 lesser teams. That's all they've done. But now they get to play at home against an Illinois team that has played solidly and just methodically beat teams that were in front of them. So I'm not saying Indiana is going to win.
Well, I'll admit I have not watched any of those games, so I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert here. But just going off of last year, and what I saw from those teams, I think I would agree with Vegas that I would give the edge to Indiana, and it's at home for Indiana. Though to your point, if we subtract the 3 points for the home and field advantage, that means they think Indiana's only up by 1.5 points. So they're thinking it's going to be a close game. But I'll say Indiana wins and maybe a low-scoring defensive affair. Let's say 24-21 over Illinois.
Okay. See, now I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go Illinois wins. I think it probably will end up being a little higher scoring. So I'm going to say Illinois 34-27 for Indiana.
All right, fair enough. And then lastly, the thing that you teased at the very beginning of the podcast was that we had 2 coach firings in week 3, which is obviously not usually what happens. But both teams got off to an 0-3 start and lost disappointingly here in week 3. So the athletic directors decided to pull the plug. We talked about UCLA, I believe, after the podcast last week because they're in the Big Ten and we play them. And you are actually planning to come out here to LA to watch that game against Nebraska. But they fired Deshaun Foster in just his second year as the coach. They lost 35-10 to New Mexico. Interestingly, this Deshaun Foster guy apparently had not only no head coaching experience before being hired, but no coordinator experience either. He was a former running back alumni who they brought on and has now been let go, but he's got a $6.4 million buyout to keep him safe on his way out.
Yeah, to soften the blow.
Yeah, no kidding.
Jeez. Yeah. So with regard to the UCLA thing, so here is a direct quote. Okay, now understand that you went through the losses. I mean, they look terrible, right? That they were absolutely going in the wrong direction. Totally get that, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the quote from the athletic director. I regret putting Deshaun in that situation where we were going into the Big Ten, and even though we were supported from a resource perspective, getting a start so late really disadvantaged the beginning to his coaching career here. That's a specific direct quote from the athletic director at UCLA, Martin Jarmond. Okay, so he's basically saying, yeah, I totally get why my head coach that I hired is failing, but I'm going to fire him anyway.
Well, what does he mean by a late start?
Well, because they had made the decision to move to the Big Ten, and the program was not in a position to compete on the Big Ten level. They did not have the facilities. They did not have the resources. They did not have the money. They did not have the NIL structure. They didn't have any of that stuff, right? So he was in no position to allow Deshaun Foster to do what Nebraska allowed Matt Rule to do, for example, to hire all these people. You look at Nebraska staff with a general manager and all these, player personnel people and all this stuff. No way did they have that, right? And now we may be hearing some noise in the background now. It is now pouring rain here in South Dakota.
I was wondering what that was. Okay. And I will say, because obviously, UCLA, a program, I should say, of some reputation, out here in LA in the Big Ten, so you could see them getting somebody good for the job, like Chip Kelly in the past. But I saw this industry source on On3 Sports about the UCLA job. It says, quote, "Next coach, better story is who would take that job. Chip Kelly ran for a reason. Terrible administration, no resources, they're getting crushed, no NIL, and currently no chance to compete in Big Ten football."
Right. And keep in mind, the person who came in second for that head coaching job was Coach White,
right,
who was our previous defensive coordinator, who's now the defensive coordinator at Florida State. I wonder if Coach White's going to get another call.
Well, but with all that being laid out, right, and with how Florida State's looking this year, like they might go to the playoffs, does Tony take that opportunity?
Well, that's right. And does the UCLA athletic director, is he even allowed to hire somebody that's never been a head coach before? Tony's never been a head coach.
After this experience they just had.
Right. So I think he has to go get somebody who's at least had a level of success as a head coach at some point. I would worry more about Dana Holgorsen being tapped. If Nebraska beats Michigan this weekend, the Dana Holgorsen talk will explode.
So even if we get an amazing result and beat Michigan, there's a downside to Nebraska.
Well, I'm just saying he would get a lot of buzz. Now, I don't even know whether Dana would choose that or not, because like you said, I think he might go out there and certainly test the waters. But after he saw what they have there, after what he's seen at Nebraska, he'd be like, "There's no way this is going to work," versus what Nebraska's got. So, no, thank you.
Right.
I think that's what would ultimately happen.
Now, the other firing that also happened here today on Sunday as we're recording is Virginia Tech's coach Brent Pry. This is his fourth season with Virginia Tech, and they just lost 45-26 to Old Dominion, the team I mentioned earlier that played Indiana pretty tough. They lost twice before that against better competition. They lost to Vanderbilt and to South Carolina. So while you're frustrated with those losses, those are more reasonable, but I guess losing to someone so far below you was probably the final straw for this athletic director. And he also is going to be paid more than $6 million for his buyout as well.
Yep. Well, and keep in mind that, the long and I'm forgetting names here because it's getting late. But there is Virginia Tech had a run of 15, 18 years with a great head coach. Then his son took over as the head coach, didn't do well, got fired after a certain number of years, did well initially, but wasn't able to sustain that success. And then now they've moved on to this guy, and he didn't work. So now they're in the turnstile, right? And in this day and age, with the burdens of NIL and revenue share, you can't get into that turnstile.
You're probably talking about Frank Beamer.
Yeah.
Yeah, he coached there from 1987 to 2015, so quite a run there.
Right, and he was great. And then they gave his son a chance, because his son was on the staff, and he didn't do well enough to their liking because he didn't sustain dad's success, which was probably an unrealistic expectation. And then rather than being patient, they went to this other guy who then has struggled, and now they're firing him. That's a tough place to be in if you're Virginia Tech.
Yeah, and I think it's ironic that just last week we were talking about if athletic directors would have longer leashes for their coaches, because knowing the expense of these buyouts and how you need to pay players now with the revenue sharing, and that you're coming to your boosters for so much nowadays, for facilities to be able to compete with your rivals and things of that nature, and NIL, that, these athletic directors might give these coaches longer leashes. But it seems like the answer so far to that is a no.
No, exactly. And to me, it makes no sense, right? And then listening to that guy's quote, that athletic director's quote, yeah, I got the support of my president and all that. Yeah, you have that support until next board meeting, when all the board members are like, look at all this money we're spending. And now when you come to me with the new coach, and the new coach wants $8 million a year instead of 6, and he wants to be able to hire 16 new people that don't currently exist in the UCLA athletic department, but he needs those people because that's what Michigan has, that's what Ohio State has, that's what Nebraska has, that's what Minnesota has, that's what Indiana has. And if you want to compete in the Big Ten, that's what you need to do. But oh, by the way, UCLA, your athletic department is already in the red to the tune of $150 million or whatever the heck it is, right? And the answer is no. So you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. What do you do? Unless you have a Phil Knight or somebody, an oil guy, who's willing to come in and write a $200 million check and just make all that other stuff go away, you're in a world of hurt.
No, you're right. So yeah, it's a weird world for sure that we're living in now, but we'll have to see if my prediction from that last podcast about at least for the non-top tier positions, athletic directors trying to negotiate down the length of these contracts and the size of these buyouts and things like that, kind of knowing that, hey, I may have to fire you in 2 or 3 years if this doesn't work out, just because I'm already spending so much money on all this other stuff now that I wasn't before,
Right.
that, you need to recoup on the investment. And so, I'm sorry, but this is the new reality. I'll be curious to see if that happens.
I would love to see an athletic department have success convincing a top tier coach that is the acceptable way to go.
Right. But that's why I said not top tier, right? Because I know that won't fly for the top tier coaches, but, UCLA is not top tier, right? It's more, a step below that, like B tier or whatever, you want to call it. So they can maybe try that, but, considering, I guess maybe a coach might be willing to do that if you get the promise that, hey, I'm putting all this money into NIL and into our facilities because I know we're behind, and that screwed over our last coach.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. That's the message he has to go out to all the alumni and get a bunch of money. So whoever is the next AD, if it's not this guy, or if it is this guy, he's got to go out and pound the pavement and get to the ask like now. What I'm interested in is I'm reading all those articles. They didn't say who the interim head coach was going to be. I'm assuming it's one of the coordinators.
Right. I would assume so, but I didn't see that either.
Right. So maybe they haven't decided yet.
Yeah.
So, but regardless, I'm bummed because I would have rather played Deshaun because he clearly did not have, the handle on the team.
But as we know, with our experience with Mickey Joseph, previously when Scott was fired and everything, that's a gamble, right? Of a new coordinator coming in, on the one hand, it could recenter the team and things could get turned around, or it could just spiral even further off course. And the players are like, it's already week 3 and we're 0-3. Why should I even try? Why should I injure myself, trying
Right.
to do this? I'm going to try to transfer, all sorts of stuff. Like, who knows what could happen?
Right. Right. Yeah. It depends on how the players respond. And of course, that is significant by who that coach is, who that interim coach is. Are they able to get people believing or not? Right. That's the bottom line.
Very true. All right. Well, this was a bit of a longer episode, but it is a big game coming up, the Michigan game. So we're hoping that we're coming back to you next week talking about our surprise win over Michigan. But we'll see what happens.
Yep.
All right. We hope you out there enjoyed listening to this podcast. You can email us at at collegefootballthrowdown@gmail.com. That's our new email address. You can also find us if you search for Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can search College Football Throwdown there, or you can find us on YouTube now. See our few video episodes that we've done and our audio episodes that are updated there every week. So thank you out there for listening to this episode, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. Until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red. 3-0.